It was August 2005, Plainfield, Indiana. The witness, who lived in a highly developed housing neighborhood, was staying up late at night watching television when he suddenly felt compelled to look out the window of his second-story unit. When he glanced at the clock, it was around 4:20 a.m. He rose from his bed and slowly peeked out from behind the blinds. That's when he saw, across the street, right underneath a streetlight, 3 entities walking. There was a tall one, a shorter one, and another tall one. In that order. The short one was in between the 2 tall ones. He noted that they were skinny, had long limbs, slightly larger heads than humans, and walked in a strange manner. One of the oddest things about the experience was that, at the exact second that he looked out the blinds, the entities turned and stared at him, as if they knew he would be looking out the window at that exact second. The other very strange thing about them was that they were not walking side by side, as most regular people would do. They were walking in a single file, and walked in a sort of mechanical zombie manner, arms bent back dangling, knees bent, and heads dangling as well, but cocked so they could stare at the witness. However, because of an unspecified glare outside the room, the witness could not make out any specific facial details or the color of their skin. They kept staring at the witness as they walked, and the witness felt compelled to stare back. The trio eventually went out of sight, obscured behind a row of houses. When he could no longer see them anymore, the witness remembers backing away from the window, putting his hands on his head, and saying, "What do I do now?" For some inexplicable reason, his legs gave out, and he crumpled to the floor. He crawled over to his bed and got back in. He began to panic. His heart was racing, his legs felt useless, and he had the feeling that if he fell asleep, he might not ever wake up again. He contemplated calling his older sister, or possibly 911, but elected not to. Eventually things settled down, and he was finally able to regain the use of his legs. This incident seems very reminiscent of the mirrored men phenomenon, spoken about so often on Derek Hayes' The Monsters Among Us podcast. The mirrored men is a term coined by Hayes to describe a relatively new phenomenon, in which 3 similar-looking men are observed to move in a synchronized fashion, as if the witness was looking at a mirror image. In fact, this Indiana case sounds a lot like the Burlington, Iowa case described on a September 22, 2016 episode of the Monsters Among Us podcast. So, is this a mirrored men case? I have my doubts. At no point does the Indiana witness mention that they were moving in unison, only that their postures were the same and that they were peering up at the witness, though the similarity between the 2 cases is very noticeable, and I encourage everyone to give the Iowa case a listen. On July 16, 1985, a man and his mother had just visited a friend, and at around 9 p.m., they left, taking the bus home. It was a pleasant summer evening, the witness recalled. They were making the short half-a-mile walk from the bus stop to their home in Manchester in England when they became aware of something in the night sky, an object. The witness described it as, quote, "a perfect triangle, all white and lit." According to the witness, it was just sitting there in the sky, above some fields at the back of their house. Upon returning home, they went directly to the back door, as it allowed them an unobstructed view of the field in which the craft was hovering. The witness noted that it was around 9:30 p.m. at this point. We stood looking at it, talking about what it possibly was, until it suddenly seemed to shrink to a bright dot, probably flying directly away from us. Once it was distant, but still visible, it shot straight up at an incredible speed and was gone. I know we stood there for a few minutes, not saying anything, and then suddenly Dad was home from the pub, and it was after 11 p.m. This surprised the witness, who was certain they'd only watched the object for a few minutes, not over an hour. He and his mother have a very vivid memory of this, and they cannot explain what happened in that space of missing time. This is a pretty standard encounter. A UFO is sighted, followed by a period of lost time, which the witnesses cannot explain. It's interesting that the witness described the object as a triangle, as most paranormal researchers and skeptics dismiss any case involving triangular vehicle as the Black Project TR-3B, though there are a large number of missing time cases that involve triangles. So it seems odd that if all triangle cases are ours, what purpose would it serve for us to be snatching up regular citizens? No doubt some triangle sightings are definitely ours, but as this case highlights, probably not all. October 31st, 2003. Brussels, Belgium played host to a very bizarre UFO encounter. This case can be found in the files of the Mutual UFO Network. A married couple had gone out to a nearby pond to do some night fishing. At some point, the wife noticed something in the sky and pointed it out to her husband. They assumed that it was just a plane and continued fishing, but as the object got closer, they were able to make out that this was no plane. It was shaped like a disc and had no visible wings. It seemed to move towards the couple, even brushing over the tops of some trees by the pond. The witnesses noted that it had a row of windows on a dome, and both witnesses were able to see shadowy figures moving around inside. It eventually came down into the water, not far from where they were in the boat. Apparently the craft was very hot because when it touched the water, steam began to rise up, fogging up the windows and making it difficult to see inside. The couple's dog, who was in the boat with them, began to bark uncontrollably. When the man tried to calm the dog down, it bit his hand, something it had never done before. The waves created by the impact on the water caused their small boat to become unstable, and it capsized, sending the witnesses and their dog into the water. At that point there was much confusion, and both felt very dizzy. After a minute or two, the craft lifted out of the water and flew back into the air. Their barking dog was suddenly nowhere to be found, and they believed that it had drowned. Further, they noticed that they were surrounded by dead fish, which were floating on the surface of the water. In the sky, birds were flying around in large numbers for some reason. As the object left, the husband began to feel sick. His wife also felt sick. Being in the water with all the chaos around them, they lost sight of the craft in the sky. They eventually swam to shore and discovered a burnt tree limb on the sand, which they believe had been struck by the object when it initially moved towards their position. Throughout the affair, the husband recalled being absolutely terrified, and that he experienced a sensation of being out of his body.